Hello, I'm continuing my reviews on the Prom Night series with Prom Night IV, Deliver Us from Evil, which I have on the same DVD as Prom Night III. Now, Prom Night IV, I believe, was released theatrically in Canada in 1991, but got a limited theatrical release in the US in 1992, but for the most part, in most places, it was released straight to video. Now, this is the fourth film in the Prom Night franchise, and not counting the 2008 remake, this is the final film of the original Prom Night series. Now, the only two films in this franchise to have any real sort of connection to each other would be Prom Night 2 and 3. Other than that, the Prom Night series is really an anthology series where each film is a standalone story that just happens to be centered around prom night. The only thing that bridges all four films is they're supposed to be set at the same school, Hamilton High, so that is one area where you could maybe argue that the films are in continuity with each other. They're just focusing on different groups of characters and completely different scenarios surrounding this school. Although in this movie's case, literally only two scenes in this movie actually take place at Hamilton High, and even though the film is taking place on prom night, the main action of the story doesn't even happen anywhere near a prom. Actually, the opening scene of this movie takes place at Hamilton High School on prom night in 1957, which means that if all the films are in the same continuity, that means this is happening literally on the same night that Mary Lou died, and is probably happening at the same time. And I have sort of a fan theory that might connect this even more to Hello Mary Lou Prom Night 2, but I'll address that later on in this video. Now, Prom Night 4 is not a terribly good movie at all. I like it slightly better than Prom Night 3, but not by much. Mainly, the film is just boring. Now, the plot of Prom Night 4, Deliver Us from Evil, is it begins in 1957, and we follow this priest named Father Jonas, who gets possessed by the devil. However, he believes that he is being possessed by an angel of God, who has given him supernatural powers, and he believes that God wants him to punish promiscuous teenagers, particularly teenage girls, by killing them as a way to save their souls. And after murdering a teenage couple on prom night, he's found by members of the clergy who lock him up. We jump ahead 34 years later, and we follow this young priest named Father Colin, who is tasked with caring for Jonas, who we learn has been kept under lock and key by the church. Basically, the church has been keeping him all these years hidden and under sedation. And somehow Father Jonas hasn't aged in all these decades, I guess because he's no longer a normal human being. But one day, Father Colin doesn't administer Jonas's daily dosage, allowing him to wake up and escape. And basically, in the movie, Father Jonas starts going after a group of teenagers who are staying at this old house that used to be a monastery. Now, the film stars Nicole Boer, credited as Nikki Boer, who people might recognize as Ezri Dax from the last season of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, as the character of Megan, who is basically the film's final girl. Now, Nicole Boer is a fine actress, and she does a good job in this movie, but the character of Megan is a very bland, forgettable character, in my opinion. And I could honestly say that about most of the characters in this movie. However, Megan's best friend, Laura, played by Joy Tanner, she was the one character out of the teenage characters who did kind of stand out to me. And probably my favorite moment involving this character, now basically Laura and Megan are from a Catholic school, and Laura is caught having sex with her boyfriend in the school's parking lot, and the nun is berating them in her office, and the nun is like, you were, and then Laura just turns to the nun and blatantly says, "We're fucking, sister." Now, Megan and Laura's boyfriends, Mark and Jeff, are played by J.H. Wyman and Alle Ghadban, if I'm saying his name right. And Father Colin is played by Brock Simpson, the only actor to appear in all four of the original Prom Night movies. And he's actually pretty good in this movie. But the standout performance in this movie is definitely James Carver as the villain, Father Jonas. And I like how in the movie it's left somewhat ambiguous whether Jonas really is possessed by the devil, or if he really is receiving his orders from God. Because we like to think that God is loving and forgiving, but what if God really is the angry, vengeful God that we see depicted in the Old Testament? And I actually think the movie would have been more effective if there wasn't anything supernatural going on, because in real life we do have psychos out there who kill in God's name. But Father Jonas is a somewhat sympathetic villain because it is implied in the beginning of the film that when he was a child, he was the victim of sexual molestation from a priest. Now, I mentioned how in the beginning of the film you see Father Jonas murder these two teenagers in the high school parking lot of Hamilton High on prom night in 1957, and if this is connected at all with Hello Mary Lou Prom Night II, that means that's happening probably parallel to Mary Lou getting killed. And since Father Jonas clearly does have supernatural powers, maybe Father Jonas somehow also caused Mary Lou's death. And if that's the case, that means he's also at least indirectly responsible for the events of Prom Night 2 and 3. But that's just the fan theory, and I'm sure I'm probably way overanalyzing it, and I'm sure the filmmakers weren't even remotely thinking of something like that. So the film tries to have some social commentary on sexual abuse going on in the church, which at the time was a relatively new scandal, even though it had been going on for decades at that point. Actually, probably not even decades. I'm willing to bet there was probably sexual abuse going on in the church from the very beginning. Like, you have the fact that Father Jonas was the victim of sexual abuse, but other than that, the movie doesn't really do much with all that. And maybe I'm expecting way too much from an early 90s straight-to-video slasher film, but what I think would have been way more interesting, now in the beginning of the film, when Father Colin is told that he has to watch over Father Jonas, he's told that he must protect the church. And maybe the reason the church wants to keep Father Jonas under sedation is not to keep Lucifer, who they think is possessing Father Jonas, from rising up, but rather to keep Father Jonas from revealing something that the church once kept secret. That, I think, would have made a way more compelling story, and the film almost starts off like it's gonna be like that, but it soon devolves into the typical slasher film where Father Jonas is just picking off horny teenagers one by one. And again, maybe I'm expecting way too much from a goddamn Prom Night sequel, but I feel like there were a lot of missed opportunities to make a really interesting religious-based horror film. So yeah, I don't really recommend Prom Night 4. I like it better than 3, but not by much. But that was my review on Prom Night 4, Deliver Us from Evil, and my next movie review will be on the 2008 Prom Night remake. But until then, remember this about your high school prom, kids. It's not who you come with, it's who you take home.